mysteries of creation are there. Up in the sky. Up in the sky. The moon and the planets are there. And new hopes for knowledge and peace are there.
Justin, it's an honor, and welcome everybody else is here. I believe I see Dana. Hello, Dana.
I was muted. Sorry. Hi.
Hey. The person of the hour, and someone that we're so grateful to have volunteered.
You're the person of the hour, right?
I'm the person who checks the hour on the birth certificate.
There you go.
So welcome everybody. We'll give it just another couple minutes here to let some people filter in, and we can just kind of discuss while we're waiting. You feel free to unmic yourself if you like, because it's kind of an intimate group here, so we can get to know each other in the beginning, as we will get to know each other throughout the time together, because this is a archetypal astrology reading, and it's a one-on-one quasi one-on-one what's the word I'm looking for, like replication of a one-on-one reading, but it's actually in a group scenario, so we're actually going to open it up at different points for group interaction. And you don't have to interact, but if you'd like to, then that's what we're here for. And also there's something, I'll get into this a little bit more when we officially start, but there's something to an astrology reading, which is an analysis of someone's birth chart and an analysis of their transits. So there's a sense of kind of like we're analyzing something. We're analyzing two objects almost, the birth chart and the transits. And that's one way of seeing a reading, but actually there's another level of experiencing a reading, which is that we are examining kind of the fundamental building blocks of the human psyche and of our perception of reality, which are present as right now, as we're doing the reading. So the reading is itself also a participation with the archetypal energies of which we're discussing. And so a reading is almost like an animal of its own. It's almost like it has its own characteristic. And so having a bunch of people, a nice group together for a reading makes it, makes for that unique experience. So I'm gonna actually just start because I've already kind of started talking. Well, welcome everybody here. We have about 9 or 10 people with us here right now. Nice group. I'm anticipating a kind of an intimate group today, which is great. That's what we want. We want to have a sense of personal connection, because an astrology reading is very personal. It's almost like if a life was a present, we all have what our life appears to be on the outside, which is like the wrapping on the present. But when we look into the charts and we sit with somebody and we honestly explore their life, it's like opening up the present and seeing what's on the inside. And what's on the inside is never a lump of coal. What's on the inside is always a gift, always a gift. And the archetypes kind of light the way of the path of realizing that, of connecting with that, seeing that, honoring that. And so it's nice to have kind of a small group, because that is what allows us to have a sense of kind of intimate connection, of personal proximity, because of just the sensitive quality of what we're exploring. Okay, so I'm gonna dive in here. So my name is James Moran. I'm an archetypal astrologer, and what we're doing tonight is we're doing a live chart reading demonstration, and that is going to be structured in such a way that it's going to be a little bit difficult than how I work with clients. A little bit different than how I work with clients normally, because when I work with clients normally, I have a 2-hour session. So it's 2 hours, and it's that entire time we're very engaged, and there's kind of like a a tight connection between the client and myself in which we dive in and explore together. And we don't have 2 hours today. So we have less time, and we also have a different dynamic here because it's not a one-on-one reading. It's like it's a one-on-one reading that also includes an audience and also includes audience participation at different points. And so it's going to be, we're going to explore as much as we can explore, but and we're going to go quite deep, and there's going to be a different angle and dynamic than with a one-on-one reading because, again, the time period is shorter, but also the breadth of input is broader because we have an audience here. And so what we'll do is we'll start in by introducing our wonderful volunteer here today, and we will structure it in such a way that we'll begin by asking the volunteer some kind of directed questions about their life so that we can find out about their life. And my urging for you, for the audience, is to consider this kind of like story time, in the sense that, you know, a story involves conflict, it involves resolution, it involves kind of like there's anticipation, there's a sense of being on the edge of your seat, there's some kind of like suspense and different emotions that engage us. And actually every life has that. Every life has that if we look close enough at that life. And so my urging for you is, during the period when we're exploring Dana's life, to look at it as story time, to really get into what you're listening to, and get into what is the, almost like a, you know, movie or something like that. Get into what are the themes, what's the depth, what's you know, what's wanting to come through in this story. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the charts, and we're gonna be looking at the natal chart and the transit chart, current transit chart of roughly now through the next year, and start to demonstrate what an astrology reading looks like in terms of the feedback that I give. Because during an astrology reading, I always start with asking questions about the life of the client, and then getting into the charts. And so we'll at different points actually punctuate it and take a break. And that is when we're going to open it up to feedback from the audience. You know, maybe you have insights, maybe you have questions, maybe you have curiosities. And that's the time, that's the wiggle room, that's the play time to kind of let the process be organic. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody's welcome to, you can turn your, you know, your cameras on if you want. But I will ask you to remain muted during the portions in which we're not doing kind of the discussion, and we're doing a little more pointed exploration. So again, everybody, welcome. Thank you for being here. And I want to introduce Dana Wylie. And Dana is, I'm actually going to pull up Dana's biography, if that's all right. Is that all right, Dana? Okay. So Dana is a very talented, famed Canadian folk musician of renown that I have had the pleasure of being able to hear the music of before, and it was very enchanting. And so Dana Wylie is a musician and theater artist from Edmonton, Alberta, whose original work is rootsy, spacious, thought-provoking, and essentially joyful. Her fifth and latest album, The Earth That You're Made Of, earned a Canadian Folk Music Award nomination for Contemporary Singer of the Year. She's also the immeasurably proud and generally overwhelmed mother of a 9-year-old Anna and 2-year-old Grayson. Her theatrical song cycle, Makings of a Voice, had its digital world premiere in March, and her 6th album, How Much Muscle, will be released any minute now. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to ask for a little bit of engagement from the audience here. If you have your, let's turn your videos on if you can, just to get a little bit of engagement, so I can kind of get some feedback, see how people are responding here. Okay. All right. So with this, we're going to start the reading and say hello to our good friend, Dana. Hi, Dana.
Hi.
Thank you so much for
Oh, it's
being
my
here with
pleasure.
us.
I'm a little nervous, but I'm also really excited, and I'm pleased to be here.
Good. Nervousness is a sign of the exuberance of life.
Yeah.
I saw somewhere, there was a quote from two musicians, actually. This may be appropriate to you. And one was a musician that was having issues with anxiety. And she was saying, every time I have to perform live, I get these like butterflies in my stomach, and it's really, I have all this like nerves, and it's really uncomfortable. And, or that's, it's all this, I feel this energy moving up from my legs and butterflies in my stomach. And then the other interview was with Bruce Springsteen. He said, yeah, I love going on stage. I love that moment before I perform. There's this energy moving up my legs, and I get these butterflies in my stomach. And it's the exact same description as the nerves. And so it's kind of exemplary of the, the way that we define that which we are experiencing.
So true.
So Dana, let's get started with the reading. You ready to jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have your birth chart and your transit chart up here.
Okay.
I'm going to share that so everybody can see. Okay, so I'm using Astro Theme right now for the moment. And this is your birth chart, and I just want to make sure we got it correct. Wednesday, December 26, 1979, 4:39 p.m. in Saskatoon.
Yep.
Correct? Okay, great.
That's
Okay,
it.
so here we have Dana's birth chart, and here we have Dana's transit chart, and this is the transit chart that is created for today. Though the way that we'll be looking at the movement of the outer planets, it'll give us a window into now through the next year. Okay. And so Dana, let's start off by asking if you would be willing to share a little bit with us about where you're at right now in your life. What's going on for you right now? What are some themes that are going on for you right now? What are some themes that you would be interested in having some insight about? And also, where would you like to be moving towards? How does that sound?
That sounds good. Sounds like a lot.
Yeah,
So
packed in a bunch there.
yeah, it's so well, I mean, I'm in my early 40s, and I'm definitely having an experience of this feeling of like I feel like I'm just starting to figure stuff out, and like figuring out how, like, who I actually am and how I want to live my life. And I feel like now that I'm looking back, I feel like I spent a lot of my 30s, if not even earlier than that, going through a lot of identity stuff. And like, whenever, the various ways in which I constructed my identity, like whether through music or various other, you know, things that I was doing, roles that I was playing, when those would come, if those any of those came to be on shaky ground, it was very threatening for me. Like very, like I realize now how tightly I was sort of holding on to those identities. And that's something that kind of came to a crisis point in 2018. And like I seriously thought I was gonna die. I thought I was gonna die. Um, and now that I'm kind of sort of in the aftermath of that, I'm having this new sort of experience where I actually am feeling those things finally, after years of feeling like I want to let these things fall away, and I just want to find out who I am and just let that be, and let that, I want to see what life can look like if I just like let go of the reins and just like just be fully me. But I was always so scared to do that, because because of a fear that like whoever that is, whoever I really am, is not clearly is not good enough. And whatever, if I let that just be what's going to be revealed, is that like it's not going to result in a life that looks like what I want it to look like or whatever. And so now I finally feel like these things are falling away and I'm letting them fall away. And I feel like I'm actually in a bit of a quiet place right now in terms of, and an exploratory place. I've been experiencing a lot of physical anxiety lately. Like almost every day I have some amount of like, anxiety that I kind of feel in my stomach, but that feels almost like it's not accompanied by narratives anymore. And so you know, I can kind of handle it and I can breathe through it. And so I guess what I what I want moving into the future is just to um yeah, I think I actually feel pretty confident right now to let go of control over what I think I want my life to look like, and just kind of let it all play out based on, you know, um I guess if I do have a desire for the future, it would be to learn more how to remain on the ground and really be in touch with my own intuition and let that guide me into the future and see what what life comes from that. So that's what I can say right now, I think.
Wow. That's, I mean, bravo. That, I feel like you almost captured like the human condition on this earth right now, or something about the like collective evolution of humanity in a way, in like a microcosmic.
Yeah, I guess that's where we're all at, isn't it? And I definitely, part of the panic I've been feeling over the last year particularly is like feeling that we're all in this space where it's like we all know on some level that we're being asked to that it's like it's time to be on this world earth in a different way, like the way humans have been existing on this earth for the last God knows how long, I don't know, 5,000 years. I don't I don't know. Is not working, and it's coming to a head, and that we have to reimagine how to be on the earth. And so part of my panic over the last year is feeling like I almost have to take that on as an individual responsibility. Like I have to figure out how I'm going to be a part of that, moving things in the right direction. And it's just caused me no end of panic and feeling totally inadequate and not up for that task, and
Mhm.
and I'm finding just over the last even just few weeks, that's sort of been replaced by just a almost more like a wonder, like, and it feels like watching it unfold, like, having learned a bit about astrology over the last couple of years, and knowing about the Uranus Saturn square that's, defining this period, watching all that tension unfold, and kind of just feeling kind of privileged to be here for all of this, and that, kind of taking the pressure off myself and just saying, well, maybe, you know it's just a privilege to behold all of the shifts that are happening, and whatever I need to be doing, you know and maybe if all I can do right now is just like on a day to day, like, do what I need to do with my kids and like get all my stuff done, and again try to be in touch with my intuition in terms of the longer term thinking, then like maybe that's all I can do, and maybe that's all I need to do, and that I don't have to like have it all figured out, like, because it's this is such a huge time right now, like it feels like it's such a it feels like it's a big time to be alive and to be a human being, and for me, and this might be just my personality too, for me it feels much better and richer and more hopeful to just feel a witness to that, and just try to do my best in my day-to-day life, as opposed to like you know worrying about how I can be whatever more actively participating in it, or figuring out you know
Yeah.
how to be a part of it, or yeah, I don't know. So that's where I'm at, like lately I feel a sort of, along with my physical anxiety, a sort of calm, and a bit more contentment with um the notion of just being and learning how to just be, you know
Wow. I mean, the sometimes the artists of the world can really capture the zeitgeist and kind of, yeah, there's some immediacy sometimes to artistic expression that can really capture the moment. And I felt like you really captured the moment in your words. And also I noticed, I've definitely heard your music, and I noticed on your bio there's a theatrical component there as well to your experience.
Mhm.
And I'd be curious to hear if anybody else knows this. Like when you're talking and you were talking about going with your intuition, and then on the other side, you're talking about, I need to think about and plan about how I'm going to participate in this change that needs to happen. When you're talking about being with your intuition, your energy will kind of calm down. You kind of like have this like kind of peaceful demeanor. And when you talk about, needing to plan and use the mind to figure out the way to participate, like the energy would kind of ratchet up. Did anybody else notice that? So yeah, you were pointing out how that you feel an inclination towards going towards following your intuition. And the way I interpret that is that there is, life has a guidance mechanism, and we are life, and intuition is kind of getting in touch with that guidance mechanism of life and trusting in life. Is that a right interpretation of your what you mean when you say intuition?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, you had said earlier that there was a sense of wanting to be someone, play these certain roles, and you're coming to a point now where there's just a desire to really just kind of be like on a core level without being kind of encapsulated in roles. And you mentioned, I think that you mentioned your artistic expression in there as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I did, but it all inheres in that, because that's always, even, I mean, I've had kids for the past almost 10 years, but even since then, when I have crisis points around my identity and what the hell I'm even doing anyway, like it tends to be around my life as an art, like as a musician and in the world, that industry and that world. So yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that specifically, but that's definitely
And,
inherent.
and when you feel in touch with your intuition, does that connect up with your artistic expression? Is there a relationship there?
Yes, but it's a complicated relationship. And I think that's something that I'm also, keen to discover more about, because I don't find necessarily that when I am in touch with my intuition that I'm writing loads of songs, and because the whole endeavor of writing songs and performing songs is absolutely something that I do because it comes from the core of me, but it's also tied up in this kind of very frantic feeling I've always had, that I have to, if I'm not actively making myself it, through life, that it's like I'll cease to exist or something.
Right.
And music and my participation in music as an industry and as a world has been so tied up with that, that I find that that the artistic expression that comes from when I'm getting in touch with my intuition kind of sneaks up on me.
Yeah.
I'll pull, I try to make a regular practice of pulling a couple of tarot cards every night, and I'm always, usually I do it and I think, oh, I'm too tired to, like, because my practice is to pull some cards and then journal about it and see what, it's the journaling that always tells me how I should be interpreting the cards. And I'm always like, oh, I don't feel like it, I'm so tired, I don't know, I'm looking at the cards and going, I don't even know what these mean. And then as soon as I put the pen to paper and start writing, it all just like bubbles up, so it's there, but my relationship to artistic expression is kind of complicated.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So is it all right if we kind of dive back into finding out about your life, maybe even going all the way back to your origin and
Sure.
birth and so we've got your birth chart here. Would you be willing to share with us what like what family atmosphere you were born into, what the atmosphere was like growing up?
Sure. My growing up, I mean, the atmosphere was uh, pretty like average for, I'd say lower middle class kind of farming family on the Canadian prairies. So like, we always things, there was nothing kind of extreme or on the surface like really traumatic or not a lot of upheaval in my childhood or anything like that. But on the other hand, as I lived in this little town called Bigger in Saskatchewan until I was 17 years old and I moved away. And I really it's kind of like this weird sort of parallel experience where like I had this whole childhood with basically no upheaval and just very normal and very nothing happened, but on the other hand, like looking back on it, I kind of feel like I just survived it because just like I have always felt like just who I am as a person, like especially when I was a kid, I was very shy, very quiet. I didn't like playing rough kids games. I didn't like playing any kind of sport where you had to have contact and like um just everything about growing up in this prairie town where mostly what people care about is hockey and like that I just felt like that I wasn't supposed to be there. Or I feel like it's not that I could, when I was a kid, that I could articulate, I don't feel like I belong here. It was more a feeling of like, I think there's something wrong with me because like this inherent sense that I'm not like these people. I'm not like these people. And therefore like I'm wrong in some way because that's all I'm experiencing. And my family was sort of different too. And I had that awareness just because my mom was a city girl from from the big city Saskatoon, which is like 300,000 people, who had married this farmer and moved to this small town. And so she was an artist. She still is an artist and like a painter who also got involved with the local community theater group, and not very many people in this town were artsy, and I grew up kind of being like that too and playing piano and stuff. And also we were the only Jewish family in town. I'm Jewish on my mom's side and there was no other Jewish family in this town, and so I had that sense of kind of difference too and grew up with that and didn't really see it as a cool thing. I just wanted to not, I thought being noticed, if I was being noticed, it was probably it was probably a bad thing. Like I would probably feel like I was being like ridiculed or something like that. So I realized by the time I left um, the town when I was 17, when I graduated from high school, I kind of like I was gone. Like I was just like, by that time I was like, I'm like I'm done with this place. I need to go find somewhere where where are my people? Like I have to go find my people, like.
Yeah.
And so I still like have, I haven't really kept in touch with any of my high school friends or anything like that. I feel, and now I've lived away from that town longer than I ever lived there. So that feels like a very kind of tucked away part of my past. And that stuff is all, it's all implicated in, my vocation as well, because and I guess this is another sort of separate piece of it, but I grew up sort of always feeling like music was like really important to me, like that it was somehow really important to who I was as a person. And the only way I was able to like engage with that as a kid was through taking classical piano lessons and then classical singing lessons and competing in these like competitive music festivals that it's really common in small towns on the prairies in Canada anyway, to have these, like an adjudicator will come from a larger center where people really know what they're talking about, and all of the children who take music lessons will get up and play their piece, and then the person who's come from the outside will decide who was the best and who wasn't so great and hand out awards. And I didn't know that music was made in any other way. Like in that town, I didn't know of anyone like just having a band or like getting together to play music for fun or having jams, or, I didn't know that that was a thing really until I was in my 20s and was living elsewhere.
It turns
So
out that the United States took America's Got Talent from Canada.
yeah, well, I mean, it's different because it's like it wasn't so much like pop music and like strut your stuff. It was like a very staid form of classical music where, like, in the singing, it's like you don't move your arms and just like sing the classical piece, and of course the piano music is all. So it was more about it. It more stems from like the British colonialist
Right.
influence on how Canada came to be Canada. It's like a way that they kind of implemented their sort of quite Victorian ideas about what proper people do
Wow.
onto the colonies, to try and keep this like wild new place they were colonizing, to kind of try to keep it
Right.
British, and
And when you were growing up, what was the relationship like with your mother and your father, for instance, and also with them between each other?
um my relationship with my dad was always really like it. I mean, it's interesting because he was always our friend. Like my sisters and I have two sisters, and we all loved my dad, and he was the fun one. And we all had with my mom it was trickier because when I look back on it now, I see that she was probably very unhappy. She got married when she was 20, and she hadn't been able to explore any of her own passions, and so she had a temper when I was a kid, and she was snappy sometimes, and I don't think she was terribly happy. So, and it's not that I felt like she was a really dark, harsh presence in my life, but she wasn't just wasn't like as fun as my dad. And so um we all of my sisters and I all sort of had that relationship with her, just not quite as warm as with my dad. And their relationship was always like fine on the surface. Like um when I was a kid and my aunt was getting divorced, and my cousins who lived down the street from us were kind of implicated in that, obviously, as her kids. And I remember my parents telling me like that we're never going to get divorced. Like we're a solid family. Like that was always my feeling, and my dad, and there was lots of solidity there because my dad is a farmer. He runs his own farm. So every year is the same. And we do, he's in June, he's busy seeding. And then in August, it's harvest, and we take meals out to the field, and that's what we do. And my mom obviously had to do that, cook the meals and take them out to the field, and we would go. And so there was lots of like solidity there in terms of like what life was like. And my dad had also grown up in this town. But then when I was 25, I was living in England at the time. I was like long gone, and then my mom left my dad basically because it was like after, I think it was around the time, I don't think my youngest sister was quite out of the house yet, but like it was really when I left, when I was 17, I left and I studied acting for 2 years. I came to Edmonton, Alberta, which is where I am right now, to study acting, which is something that my mom had been interested in, like through her young adult years. When I was a kid, like she sort of came to do lots of community theater, like I mentioned. And so there was something that kind of snapped when I left, and I was like this young person, you know, studying something that I was passionate about and that my mom was also passionate about. That was kind of the beginning of the unraveling of their marriage, because she just realized everything she hadn't done. So by the time I was 25, she finally, things finally came to a point where she could no longer kind of like, try to do the mental gymnastics around maybe we can make this work. And she finally went, I have to leave. And so then they split up, and yeah. And I mean, I was grown up, so I didn't feel like in the middle of that or anything, but I observed, the anger that caused in my dad, who just felt like, this solid guy who always just, like, my dad's a really good guy, he has always just done everything right. And it has worked hard, and that it's, that's paid off for him. Like for him, it happened to work out that he worked hard in life and that his business grew and he did fine. And so it felt to him like if he invested in this family and in this life he was building, that it like shouldn't have been allowed for anybody to like take that away and alter that, you know. And it was many years for me when my interactions of him, you know, first kind of vilifying my mom and then coming around and going, well, you know, dad, like this is how life goes. And like, you know, trying to help him see that you know, if he could just get past his anger at the fact that, you know, that she shouldn't have been allowed to leave him, like it's that it wasn't some in some way wasn't fair in some grand sense, that, you know, actually like his both of their lives are better now, you know. And now that, gosh, like more than 10, it's been more than 15 years now. Now he still doesn't really speak to her, but he, I think finally now he's come around to realize that, oh, actually his life is really great right now. He has this amazing girlfriend who's much better suited to him than my mom was. And, you know, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it was an interesting kind of childhood of like just lots of solidity and normality and like a solid family that, you know, that then, but for me was like traumatic in its own way because I felt like I didn't fit there. And also like realize now that both of my parents were just so young. Like now that I've been through my 20s and my 30s, like it kind of blows my mind that they were just raising 3 kids
Yeah.
through their 20s, you know, like.
So let's begin to open up the charts. Is that all right, Dana?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll look at everything, all the kind of beautiful tour that you've taken us through in your life now, and look at how your life is reflected in the charts and how the story that you told us and the chart that we see both fill in each other. They both fill in a full picture. And so this reading is in the tradition of archetypal astrology. And so I'm just going to give some background here on archetypal astrology and why it's a bit different. So in archetypal astrology, we look primarily at the positions and alignments of the planets. So there's so much in this chart, for instance, that we can look at, and there's so many traditions of astrology. We could look at a lot of different things and combine all types of different things. This reading, though, is limited to looking primarily at the planets in their relationship to each other. We may occasionally bring in the signs, which are these, you know, these divisions of the circle right here. These are the signs of the zodiac. We may occasionally bring in the houses, which are numbers starting from 1 to 12 around the rim. But primarily we're looking at the glyphs around the edges, which are the planets. And the lines here that show the angular relationships between the planets. This, one of the reasons that we're using this site called Astro Theme is because they color code the lines so that it shows the tense alignments in red, shows the what are called soft aspects or alignments in blue. And that paints a portrait of a life, particularly in the sense of wanting to understand kind of the psycho-spiritual growth of a person, which is really the origin of archetypal astrology. There's a number of different traditions of astrology, like I mentioned, with a lot of different purposes, many of which are predictive. Archetypal astrology came out of the clinical research into the therapeutic use of psychedelics as a tool used to understand the psycho-spiritual growth of an individual. So used to help understand kind of in the therapeutic use of psychedelics, powerful emotions would come up, you know, subconscious content would come up. And so this is a way of looking at the map of the birth chart as a map of the terrain inside to understand what is wanting to arise, how the individual is wanting to evolve, how the kind of the inner potential and inner kind of spirit, I guess you could say, of the individual is wanting to evolve. And so for that type of portrait, we look at the alignments of the planets. And so that's what we'll do now, is we'll look at the alignments of the planets. And I'm going to talk on it for a little while here and then open it up in case anybody has any insights they would like to add. Diving in, I'll just point out, we'll probably primarily look at what are called the hard aspects first, which are the red lines. And so Dana is giving us a wonderful description of her childhood, in which she was raised on the prairie in Canada. And there was a sense of a kind of a stability of life, how life had a this kind of normalcy to it. And there was also a sense of feeling on the edge, feeling outside of the community, feeling different. And there was a component of religious tradition there, you being Jewish. There was also a component of wanting to have artistic expression and finding that in a kind of a traditional mode that was just what was available on the prairie there. And so when we look at the chart, we can see kind of really two dynamics in terms of the red lines, in terms of the hard aspects. One is that the moon, this glyph here, the moon, you can always look up in the upper left here for English letter description of what are the glyphs, is opposite Pluto here, the bottom. And then we have a dynamic here in which there's what are called right angles. These are 90-degree angles between, for instance, the Sun and Saturn, and a Mercury-Neptune conjunction and a Mars-Jupiter conjunction. And so when we look at those dynamics together, we can see, for instance, if we look at the Sun, the aspects to the Sun first, the Sun, Saturn, and the alignments that we use in archetypal astrology are about 10 degrees, the orbs, what are called the orbs, which is kind of the breadth in which a planet can fall and still be considered in alignment with another planet, is 10 degrees. And if we look carefully here, we see that this Sun Saturn square and this Mars Jupiter square to Mercury Venus are really tightly interwoven. It's almost like if you get shoelaces and you tie shoelaces together and you can pull them together, they have that diagonal that goes across. So those could be seen as distinct aspects, but actually they're part of one dialogue. They're one kind of dynamic there that involves the Sun and Saturn, but also Mercury, Neptune, Mars, Jupiter. Okay, so apprising that apart, we'll look at, so the Sun, Saturn, we can see in the sense of, in the childhood, we can see kind of both positive and kind of productive and challenging aspects of the Sun, Saturn. The Sun, the sense of I, me. The Sun is associated with our conscious sense of personhood, our name, our individual kind of energetic stamp upon the world, our central sense of identity, just like the Sun is the central hub of the solar system. And that is square to Saturn. And Saturn is associated with limitations, separations, limitations, all the kind of challenges that limit us, the reality checks that limit us, like burdens, responsibilities, but also that discipline us, and also that give us a sense of inner authority, maturity. And Saturn can be represented in the world by things like traditions that have stood the test of time. And Saturn is also associated with stability, because Saturn is that maturity grounds us, and reality checks and reality, the obligations of reality kind of keep us in a, kind of tend towards a stable life of, paying bills and being responsible and things like that. And so we can see the inflections there. The Sun does at times reflect the father in childhood, can reflect the father energy. And, the father, and even the Sun in Capricorn there, the sense that the father kind of lent a stable energy to the life, in the sense, or like reflected this sense of, like tradition, like you would go out in the fields, every season had a pace to it. It had an activity. It had, you would go out and, bring the food and have this kind of pace to everything. And also just the general kind of character. It's like you work, you keep it simple, like you work, you have your obligations, you have responsibilities, and that's like very Saturnian. At the same time, there's also this sense of the I, the me, feeling, having inherent in it a kind of a separation, a sense of feeling both separate from the culture, the larger culture there, but oddly, but sorry, not oddly, but also aligned with the traditions, both the traditions of farming, but the traditions, the kind of colonial traditions of, you know, coming out and having these musical auditions that involve a lot of discipline, you know, the uprightness, barely moving, that's very Saturnian. And so we bring that into, we tie in the Mercury Neptune and the Mars Jupiter. So Mars Jupiter is Mars is our forceful action, and Jupiter is that which is expansive. So it's kind of a swashbuckling combination, the forceful, the expansive forceful action, or the sense of fighting for an ideal. Jupiter's very, has a sense of links with ideals and the higher kind of sense of agenda to life, the higher ideals, and Mars is a kind of a forceful action there, a bravery, linked up with Mercury and Neptune. Mercury has to do with speech. Neptune is that which both refines. Neptune, the archetype of Neptune is associated with infinite expanses, the dream realm, the spirit realm, the realm of the imagination. And so when Mercury and Neptune are there, we could see early on when we were talking, Dana mentioned, you know, she pulls a tarot card before bed. And, you know, she thinks like, oh, this is, you know, this is just kind of like this is just a kind of regular task that I do every day. You know, it's just something that I do regularly. And it's, you know, there's almost like the sense of this doldrum sense that she was beginning to describe, but then she describes putting the pen to paper. As soon as the ink starts to flow, almost like a sense of channeling of what is wanting to be communicated there. And we get that commonly with Mercury and Neptune, in the sense that Mercury, writing, communication, thinking, speaking, the voice. Neptune connects it up with that which is sublime, vision, kind of visionary, the dream realm, the realm of the imagination, the collective well of the collective unconscious, of images that inspire us. And so we can see it in the practice of the tarot. You know, pulling a card is you know, kind of connecting into the collective unconscious, the collective well of imagery and archetypal symbolism, and then that flows through the pen. And so that act is kind of descriptive not only of the Mercury Neptune combination, but also the Sun Saturn. It's a sense that I do it every night. You know, it's just something that I do. It's got a regularity to it. And it almost seems like, you know, it's like brushing your teeth or something. You just got to do it. But then once we do it and we put the pen to paper, we tap in and we get that sense of the mercurial Neptunian, you know, enchantment coming through. And so we see those combinations working quite well. You know, she's obviously through her life kind of navigated to a place where, you know, a birth chart, particularly hard aspects in a birth chart, they just reflect the areas and the energies in our life that want to work themselves out. They want to get reconciled. They want to grow. You know, the tension therein wants us to step up and grow and just figure it out and wrestle with it and try to, you know, make it work. And we're all doing that. Every person alive is trying to do that, you know, whether we're aware of astrology or not. You know, so when we look at a birth chart, we can oftentimes see in the childhood the more challenging manifestations of this symbolism. And then we can see in the adulthood how the person has come to come to a place where they've kind of got the energies to work more together, more integrated, more digested, just by virtue of just life and growth. And everybody's trying to figure it out, you know? And so for instance, and you know, she was talking about in childhood, this sense of, you know, everybody's into hockey, and the sensitive child, like, afraid of too much roughhousing and too much, energy that's too forceful. And so, and that was linked with a sense of kind of being estranged or separate from the larger community. And we talked about how Sun Saturn, sometimes we can feel a bit, the sun, the identity can be associated with Saturn, that there's the kind of a separation. There's a sense of separation there. If we bring in the Mercury, Neptune, and the Mars, Jupiter, we can see how Mars with Neptune, especially in a square like that, it's interesting. It can give the forceful action of Mars. The forceful action of Mars in our birth chart is always our energy to own. But the path to owning that energy oftentimes involves Mars energy being in our vicinity, to the extent that we kind of have yet more Mars energy to integrate of our own life into ourselves. It's got to show up somewhere. And so it shows up kind of around us. And it's almost like if somebody confronts us, or we just, we get confronted all the time, almost like a behavior pattern. And I'm not saying this about you, Dana, in any way. This is a general kind of just characteristic of life in the universe. If we have behavior patterns where we get into certain types of confrontations, it's almost as if the universe is asking us each time to integrate and digest the Mars energy into ourselves. It's like it's sending the Mars energy into our sphere that's ours, actually. But until we take it, it's gotta be enacted somewhere, so it shows up as, confrontations or road rage, or somebody doing this, or somebody confronting this or aggressing that. And so when Mars is with Neptune in hard aspect, the Neptunian quality of this infinite planes, Neptune is the infinite planes, which can be very much associated with the intuition, and the sense of, like we talked about, the dream realm, the realm of the imagination, the realm of the collective unconscious, the realm of intuition. Also, though, because it's an infinite plane, no up, no down, no center, no left, no right, it can be disorienting. When Mars is in combination with that, there can be a sense of the Mars threat, whatever it is, or the Mars aggression or something like that, just kind of being an amorphous thing that's there somewhere, and we don't, it's kind of hard to pin down, basically. And so there can be a sense of, like growing up somewhere and feeling like, not wanting to roughhouse, feeling like that that everybody's into hockey, and it's kind of like a rough energy. And, in a sense that is something to be wary of. And yet at the same time, Mars is there with Jupiter. And so we haven't discussed this yet, and I'm going to kind of take a break here in a second. We haven't discussed this yet, but Mars with Jupiter in a square to Mercury and Neptune, actually, I mean, maybe we have seen this energy a bit reflected. Mars square to Mercury, Neptune, there was a mention of the mother, can have a sharp tongue, in the sense of there can be some kind of, sharp words there. Mercury, the mouth speaking, and Mars, that sharpness. And then also when we first began talking, there was a sense of wanting to enact for an ideal, wanting to get active for, like the sense of wanting to fight on behalf of the world and world change. And that can be a very Mars Jupiter component, the sense that there's like something positive out there and a wanting to engage and fight on that behalf. I've been talking for a while now. I just want to check in first and foremost with Dana and see how it's fitting, how it's landing. Any thoughts, any feelings?
It really, what you said about the relationship between the Sun, Saturn in particular, and then the like the way that interacts with the Neptune Mercury square Mars Jupiter, is like, you put that in a way that I haven't thought about it before, which is really helpful. which is that like how I've learned through the course of my life to make those things work together, because they definitely were at odds. Like the Sun, Saturn, it absolutely, like all of the difficulties I've already talked about and that you described, which also brought like the discipline of that also has had a positive aspect in my life too. Like all the musical tools that I learned early in childhood, I still like, I use them to this day. They've been very useful to me. But the way, but the Neptune Mercury when I was a kid, like because I felt like I couldn't be who I was, where I was, and all I felt was that sense of limitation, and like I just wanted something that wasn't available, even if I didn't know what that was. Like that I would fantasize a lot, like all the way through, up to even into my teenage years. Like I would just go off by myself and I would just have these fantasies about what my life would be like, and it would often involve like being on a stage, like in, because I used to really like musicals when I was in like junior high and high school. Like that's because I would perform in them. And so I would imagine that I was in like Les Miserables or something like that, and like be singing a song for all the people. And then they're just loving me. And like, I spent so much time fantasizing, and I couldn't, and for so long, I think it was hard to bring those things together. And I recall a time in probably my late 20s, like probably as I was approaching my Saturn return, where I remember learning how to make discipline talk to what I actually wanted to do, and how to, like, it was when I was 26, I started playing guitar for the first time, because I always just played piano, and I got my first guitar, and I taught myself how to play it. And I had space in my life at that time too, to really spend just a lot of time like learning the guitar and writing songs and listening to other songwriters. And I started to realize for the first time in my life that I started to believe what everyone had told me was true my whole life, which is that if you practice a lot, you will get better, whatever it is, like whether it's like songwriting or guitar or just like parenting, like anything, that like practicing really works, and that it will spark creativity. And that's not something that I very much resonate with what you said about about through life coming to allow those things to talk to each other and to work together rather than being at odds. So
Wow.
that's the thing you said that the most made me go, oh yeah, ding ding ding.
Awesome. Yeah, amazing. I want to check in with the audience and see if there's any observations or kind of questions anybody has, as we get a tour through both Dana's life and archetypal astrology.
I have some observations. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. I just think it's interesting. My father's parents were immigrants from Austro-Hungary, and they went to Saskatoon, but they left and went to San Francisco. But I would always hear stories from my aunt about how some Orthodox Jewish cousins in New York would say prayers before they did everything. And as a kid, to me, that just was so unimaginable. Growing up in Northern California in a very unreligious, liberal place. But then when later in life, I went on a trip to Jerusalem, and I experienced kind of what that was like just a little bit firsthand, and that the reason for doing that is to put you in touch with something much larger than yourself, and to get you to be really present all of the time. And I'm not sure if it doesn't sound like you were raised religious, but I see that in your chart with the Mercury-Neptune conjunction in the 6th house, which is very much about everyday activities. And I just think it's really striking and beautiful. And also, it's new for me to kind of just focus on the planets and the archetypes, and kind of not so much on the signs, but I just also see that presence in the moon and Aries and also some of the isolation there, perhaps. And maybe that your mom felt that being away from the city, maybe. But anyways, I don't want to ramble on too much. There's so much there, and it's just really, really beautiful to witness. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Alexis. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Any other observations or questions?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi,
Monty.
John.
Hello.
When you spoke about the Mars-Neptune aspect and how that tied in with this sort of amorphous aggression that was sort of hanging there in a cloud, I could relate to that too. I have a Mars-Neptune conjunction. It's partile. It's in the 8th house. And I remember when I was a little kid, I used to be afraid of the dark. And there was a living room right next to my bedroom, and the door never fully closed. There was always this black crack there, which always had an ominous feeling for me. And it was sort of like this amorphous cloud of a potential aggression that was there.
Wow.
You know. But I think it's also related to my mother in the sense of she was very free with expressing aggressive energy. You know, I mean, she didn't have any restraints. And so there was probably a fear of that erupting at some unpredictable moment. And it's funny because she does have her moon at the end of Pisces conjunct Mars, square Saturn, square Pluto, and semi-squaring Uranus, which is like, it's surprise aggression, just jumping out at you. So, I mean, it all sort of fit together there as I was hearing that.
Wow. Thank you, Monty.
Okay, thank you.
Insights, yeah. Yeah, excellent. All right, shall we move forward? Yeah, Dana? Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So great. So yeah, this Dana added a piece about how when she was young and was feeling kind of a sense of isolation, I think you may have described yourself as being alone, like when you're alone, going into fantasies of getting on stage, Les Miserables, singing, acting in front of others. And that is, it's a wonderful illustration of this combination here, the sense of, the Saturn, the sun, Saturn, the solitude, and then, that opening up into kind of a Mercury, Neptune realm of imagination in which there's a lot of Mars bravery there, kind of getting up. And even Les Miserables is very, it's a very Jupiter, Neptune kind of, this is Victor Hugo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was born with Jupiter, Neptune. I'll have to check on that. But, there's kind of like an idealistic, it's kind of like this, it's kind of a Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, get up there and, and sing. And it's got these high ideals and principles and spiritual principles. And so it kind of encapsulates that energy quite well. And the entire combination there. And so we also have a Moon Pluto opposition in your chart, and that opposition is the Moon Pluto, as opposed to the Sun Saturn, the Moon Pluto can equally be associated with, there was you were kind of describing taking food. Your mother would make the food and you take it out and eat it in the fields, and kind of there can be a Moon Pluto aspect there in the sense of Moon is associated with our emotions, our family, our emotional connections, our emotional intimacy, our nurturing and nourishing. These are lunar things, the food and the connection there, and having it in nature, in the fields, in the dirt, in the roots. It's kind of like a rootsy Plutonic thing there. The Sun Saturn is a little bit more like the regularity of the seasons, maybe you know, the way you describe the summer and the spring. The Pluto would be a little bit more like the dying harvest, you know, the composting, the fall, the fall, you know, the kind of like scorpionic time. And so also the moon Pluto can be that the moon, the Pluto, the archetype, you know, the Greco-Roman god Pluto is the god of the underworld, you know, it's associated with the hidden, the powerful, what's beneath the earth, the powerful volcanic elemental, you know, powers of the earth that are hidden. You know, the god of the underworld ushers people through the transformative process of entering into the underworld. And sometimes in the stories and the myths, you know, a hero would have to go into the underworld and they would come out transformed, and that's very Plutonic. So Pluto's hidden is associated with the hidden, the powerful. And there was a description of the mother having kind of like this hidden life there, the sense of, you know, this kind of like powerful needs, drives that that were hidden, you know, kind of relegated into the underworld because she wasn't living in the city. She wasn't, you know, she was living out in the small town, which was actually called Bigger. And
Yep.
and so yeah, did you ever feel, because there also can be with the moon Pluto, I mean, what the reason why we're talking about the mother here is because the moon can often be reflective of the mother in our childhood, not exclusively. You know, the moon can also be reflective of the family itself, family atmosphere, sense of belonging, emotional conditioning. And then the moon is reflective of our own emotional substrata. And so, you know, we're talking about the mother here, but really we're looking at your chart. We're looking at Dana's chart, you know, and Dana's chart is the one that has moon Pluto. And so there can be an association of moon Pluto with not just that the mother has this kind of hidden emotional, powerful material there, but also that that the emotions themselves carry a Plutonic energy. Like the emotions themselves can kind of come through like a volcano, you know, like an erupting volcano. The emotions can come out and we can be transformed, you know, almost like a volcano of tears or something. And then afterwards, like the landscape is transformed. Whoa. That's a kind of a moon Pluto quality. Wherever Pluto is in the chart, it really connotes the surrender to the elemental force and the storm of life, the transformative phoenix fire of life. And so moon Pluto connotes, you know, the ability to really feel, really go deep, you know, have the emotions be the entryway into the underworld. And similarly, powerful emotions, sometimes when we are engaged with another, if the emotions are not allowed, and as they often are in our society, as they often are not in our society, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of the therapeutic use of psychedelics, is because it allows the space for deep, powerful emotions, cathartic experiences to happen. But in normal society, there isn't always the venue for these powerful emotions to come out. And so when they're kind of halfway up in the craw, you know, they're kind of like stuck halfway in, halfway out, it can show up as power struggles with another because the charge isn't allowed release. So it can end up like, you know, like look sometimes like people trying to control each other, but really it's like the emotions are so strong for each other. The connection is so strong and so tender actually that until that is released and recognized, it creates this magnetic kind of intensity. And sometimes there can be with moon Pluto aspects a sense that the mother, that some of the life course that we go on is actually the life course is actually influenced by the material of the mother, almost like that the mother's willpower and our willpower get somehow into it's almost like cars on a train or something getting linked up. So I'm going to again take a break speaking for a while there. So I just want to check in with you, Dana, and see like how this is landing with you.
Oh gosh, there are so many things that I could say. And they all have to do with my relationship with my mom. it's interesting because I feel like I've struggled to understand my moon Pluto, and I think that everything you're saying now is bringing a lot of clarity to it. But there's so many aspects to my relationship with my mom that relate to what you've just said. One of which is just the fact that I very much see myself in her. I see her in me in all the ways that make me so uncomfortable, and that I don't want to be the case. Like, in that, like, we're both artists, which is great. But I see the way she continues to struggle. Like, she's in her mid 60s now, and she still like sort of struggles in the art world in the way that it mostly rejects her. And she's really talented. Like, she has a real like a legit talent for capturing people's essences and for portraiture, and in a really deep way. But she still sort of continues to kind of like be really kind of wrapped up in how the art world just wants young sexy people, and the art world just wants this. And sometimes I'm just like, oh my god, who cares? Like, when will you reach a point where you can just do your work, and like, who cares what, like, you find your own path. But the reason it makes me so is because like it's like so mirrors my struggles in the music industry too, like. And so her, I see, I see myself in her there. And I think, we're just so similar. And even though in so many ways I would like to not be like her, like, and then there's also just the fact that, like, I think something that I already touched on, which is that when I, like, my passion for making music and also theater, which is not like, that's not a vocation that stuck with me. But when I moved away, it was to study musical theater, and I was really passionate about it, sort of in itself, but also as just like my way out of the town and out of this life where I couldn't express myself, like to finally be around people who were expressive and were artsy. And I went and did that. And all of that passion was kind of fostered by my mom's growing interest in all that stuff when I was a kid, where, by the time I was a teenager, she was actually like directing all of the musicals in the town, like the community theater productions. And she was obviously like, she just started it as a young mother, but she like found she had quite a talent for it. Like, she is naturally has always been a good singer too, and just has a talent for direction and kind of organizing people. And so that this passion for that particular art form, which was fostered in me by her, I then kind of take that out into the world. And that, I think, was quite plutonic for her. Like, I think that's what got all that hidden stuff in her churning up to the point where she couldn't deny it anymore. And that made our relationship very uncomfortable for several years. So there's that. There's also something that I haven't talked about at all yet, which is just that when I was born, it was a very extreme event for her, because she hemorrhaged after I was born. A few hours later, I think, she started to hemorrhage, and she had to have a transfusion. Like, she, if it weren't for modern medicine, she would have died in childbirth, basically. So that was, there, I think me being born had a kind of plutonic element from my mom. And then there's a story that she told me only just a few, maybe 5-6 years ago, about how when I was a few days old and she was in the hospital, she was trying to nurse me in the hospital room, and a nurse came in and saw her trying to nurse me and said, don't let her use you as a soother, as if like, like, don't, babies will just try to, like, like, don't give them the breast every time they want it, because they're just manipulating you, like. And so my mom, because she was 22, like, through the whole time, she told me this a few years ago, through the whole time I was a baby, she would like wait until I was like screaming bloody murder before she would feed me, because this nurse like so freaked her out about like using her, allowing me to use her breast as a soother, basically. So I learned this, all these years ago. And at the time I was like, that's kind of interesting. And then I, through what I happened to be going through at the time, this was like 2016, probably, that I found this out. For another reason, I started doing therapy and like working out a lot of the issues that were happening in the relationship I was in at the time. And through that, doing like talk therapy and also craniosacral therapy, I really got in touch with the deep abandonment issues that I've had, that have been so deeply implicated in so many aspects of my life, that come from that, so many aspects of my relationship with my mom, right from the beginning through to even now, and who we are as adults who relate to each other, because our relationship now isn't particularly like a mother and daughter. I don't go to her when I need to be nurtured. She's like a peer, and we have a pretty functional relationship like that, but that's what it is. And so right from the beginning up until now, it has so many aspects of, I think, of all that moon Pluto stuff that you were talking about. So
Wow.
that's interesting. That's like a big revelation for me, actually, that being how moon Pluto is for me.
Wow. Do you find that themes like, for instance, the mother and the child, and the kind of, the child at the breast is a natural moon nurturing bond. Insert Pluto, and there's this kind of, it becomes the drama, the plutonic drama of the kind of the struggles of attachment, and then even otherwise, like moving forward in life in terms of like my expression, artistic expression, your expression, a kind of like a bond through drama in a way. Do you find that those themes have shown up in any of your, compositions or artistic explorations or expression?
Like, you mean like emotion through drama, or like nurturing through drama?
Not necessarily like drama, like it has to be theatrical drama, but just the drama of human emotions, of kind of like, even if we just go with the psychological language and remove the archetypes for a second, what you talked about therapy, of like, dealing with feelings of abandonment and things like that.
Yeah, that all comes in to my writing. And I mean, what I suppose probably more than most songwriters, like what I write about and how I write and the kind of output that I do or whatever has changed a lot for me since from my early 20s when I started writing songs to now. Like, it's been like 20 years now. It's changed a lot. I think more than most people, more than for most songwriters, I think. But now definitely the thing that interests me as a songwriter is only and always like the deep transformative stuff. Like, I don't really write songs about like this relationship or like this thing that happened or this person that I met. It's like every time I write a song, it's like, oh my God, what is the thing that is totally encompassing my whole existence right now? And it's like almost like writing from that place. And then a song comes, and it's not really about anything. Like, I don't even know how to say what any of my songs are about, because it's just like, I sometimes I'll say like every song is just about whatever everything was at the time that I wrote the song, basically. Like, so yeah, I guess in that sense, and that's something that I kind of came into as a songwriter too. As I matured as a songwriter, I realized, no, this is what compels me. Like, this is what is interesting to me.
Does it feel cathartic?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Can anybody else see the themes, like in the artistic expression? There's the Neptunian quality in the sense of we talked about the channeling material writing, the pen writing, and then the kind of getting in touch with the fantasy and having that vision be something that draws the creativity out, like, imagining Les Miserables and being on stage. That's like the Neptunian inspiration, intuition, and channeling. And then the Plutonic, which is more like this forceful catharsis of emotional energy. It's kind of like a volcanic overtaking, possessing thing that we just kind of like have to surrender to. Does anybody else see that? Anything anybody's noticed? I'm gonna stop sharing for a second here, just see who's on here. Any observations? Questions? Oh wait, what did I do? I lost the train.
I'm curious about, because that is the tension, that tension there is so dynamic for creativity. And when you spoke to feeling nervous and having anxiety, I just wonder about how, if the creative process, like how much of that is involved in the creative process? Is it soothing towards it? Or I guess I would just wonder, like, do you struggle with feeling, or maybe in the past, if you struggled with feeling like something has to be perfect, and that getting in the way of that process?
Oh yeah, that is something that I've struggled with, and that I've had to kind of bring some discipline or just some mindfulness to letting go, because it does, that kind of stuff is kind of anathema to the creative process in so many ways. And yeah, I absolutely have struggled with that. And I continue to, I spent some time in grad school as well doing like musicology and ethnomusicology, and oh my God, I'll edit myself just so extreme to such an extreme point in my mind before I'll put anything down on paper that it's like sometimes it's debilitating, like absolutely. So yeah, that's on point for sure.
Wow. That's kind of a good segue actually into your transit chart. How would you feel if we looked at that?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So the kind of one of the big transits that's happening right now is that Neptune in the sky. So this is a transit chart in archetypal astrology. We got the birth chart in the center, and then we got a wider concentric circle with where the planets are now, or at any window of time. A transit chart is for looking at a window of time and getting a sense of, when we look at the birth chart, we get a sense of the themes of an entire arc of one's life. And when we look at a transit chart, it's like we're looking at a window of that life. We're looking for a specific point and kind of where on that larger trajectory the individual is. And so here, looking at your transit chart, which is, it's transit chart for today, but looking at the outer planet, because they move slowly, outer planets, it gives us a sense roughly like now through the next year or so. And so we can see that Neptune, transiting Neptune, is opposite Saturn, and it's actually square to your natal Neptune and your natal Neptune Mercury. And so it's kind of bridging. It's bridging in your birth chart. There was this Sun Saturn, and there was this Mercury Neptune squared Mars Jupiter, and that was the sense that the Sun Saturn is, we've seen the positive sense of like how you got this sense of practice. Like when I practice something, when I put in consistency, that's very Sun Saturn. It's like, if I apply myself, and the Sun's in Capricorn as well. So it's like this Saturnian sense of, if I apply over length of time, a reliable, consistent application of my energy and identity over time, I will become the thing, I'll become the musician. And then we saw the Mercury Neptune aspects in the imagination that comes in, the inspiration, and the way of how, doing something, there's kind of like this sense of, just got to do it repetitively every night, draw the tarot card or play the instrument. But then opens up the Mercury Neptune, which is that that well of inspiration and the flowing aspect of the words and the visions and the the message. And then we kind of see the same thing in reverse, the way you talk about how there's like, you create something and then the editor mind comes in. That's kind of like more of Saturn revisiting again to kind of Saturn's the great editor. It just kind of edits everything for the sake of a kind of, it's not as easily taken away by the trance of Neptune. It's more like, let's get real, this and that, like take off the shine, take off the Neptunian shine inspiration. Let's just get down to brass tacks. And it's and it can feel heavy. You know, Saturn energy can feel heavy. And the transit that's happening now, you know, returning full circle to what you had mentioned about really wanting to, in your life, come to a place of just being more real, in the sense of being yourself, and kind of dropping masks or dropping personas that are kind of like just striving to be something better than, you know, what you are, your core. You know, that's something that's the human condition, is the sense that you know, we can use the archetypes in the chart to understand actually the origin of human existence, of the origin of the universe itself, actually, the kind of karma, you know, the words they would use in the East for like karma, what starts rolling the wheel of manifestation. And when we look at the chart, we can see actually at the core of every chart, there's a sense that in the human psyche, there's a sense of, that comes in with Saturn actually, which is the sense, you know, in order for something to manifest, anything, it needs to be separate from the whole. In order for something to take form, it needs to be separate from the whole. In order for manifestation to happen from just the infinite void of possibilities, something needs to be separated out. And that is kind of encapsulated in the archetype of the individual ego. You know, we're born of the mother, and then we're separated out. We're kind of rejected from the one unified system, not really rejected, but it can feel that way. The one unified system out into an individual ego. And through that sense of separation, the world comes into manifestation. And the world coming into manifestation, at its core, we can carry with us a sense of almost like the fall from Eden or something. I think even the fall from Eden, this is totally my own opinion, you know, that story I feel is even not honest. It's very insightful into the depth of the human psychology and psyche, but it's not fully honest, because there's a sense there that Adam, you know, the Eve gave Adam the apple, and you know, Adam ate it and then separated from this eternal garden where everything is given to them, and then they're suddenly mortal and they have to deal with death and things like that. So that's a Saturnian origin story of separation. But there's still the sense of like, Adam didn't do it. You know, Adam is not still admitting the sense of deep down in all humans, there's a feeling of like, maybe I wasn't worthy, or maybe I wasn't, you know, maybe I was rejected. Maybe I was, you know, and a lot of the behavior patterns of human beings the world over, and much of what society is built upon, is avoiding that sense that, you know, deep down within us, the feeling that maybe I'm not good. You know, maybe something's wrong with me. And that feeling is just a feeling. It's just a feeling. And that is what kind of keeps the avoidance of that feeling, is actually what keeps us, you know, putting on masks, putting on personas. But really what it comes down to is just feeling that, you know, it's not going to kill us to feel that we're not bad. We're not unworthy. We are good. We're worthy. But we can feel that, you know, we can feel that it's not going to threaten our life or our evolution, even though it might feel that way. But, you know, below that, even deeper than that, is the true gem, which is the ability to just be ourselves. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to put on anything. We don't have to put on any airs, you know? And so, you know, you were speaking to that, you know, just that, like what you began with today, Dana, was a very human impulse, you know, very human just impulse of just wanting to be, you know, I just want to be me. I just want to exist. I want to be life and not have to overthink it and defend myself against it, and defend against myself and things like that. And so, you know, now in your transit chart, looking at your transits, we can see that the Neptune transiting Saturn and transiting your natal Neptune Neptune, the dream, the well of imagery and inspiration that give kind of like a spiritual zest to life, and also the ability to dissolve out and feel unified with the field of existence. These are Neptunian things. There's a positive side of Neptune. Challenging side of Neptune is escapism, wanting to just dive into that well of imagery to actually escape this feeling of feeling unworthy. And then Saturn, the sense of separation, the sense of the heavy reality that we do have to live in a separate body. We do have to be separate, and we do have limitations. But at the positive side, it's this sense of maturity of like, what, I have my own inner authority, and I'm going to, make my own limitations. I'm going to make my own discipline. I'm going to make my own delineations. And now with this transit, you were born with the Neptune Saturn conversation going, which is between the reality and the dream, but also the maturity and the true spiritual union. The maturity and the true spiritual union is kind of the higher manifestation, or the manifestation that can be very satisfying and gratifying. And then the hard reality and the dream, almost like, just the mundane existence on the plane, and then the dream of being on the stage. The disparity between the two can be very painful, or the realities of life, and then the dreams of what could be. It can be very painful. Actually, though, that combo there is just a manifestation of what we were talking about, like of the sense that of kind of avoidance of self. That's what makes something feel like a doldrum and feel like we don't want to be doing it, because we have a sense that there is no dream here. There is no spiritual connection. We're just kind of separate. Actually, though, this other impulse that you're having is the impulse of, letting the kind of the dream selves and the images and the kind of like putting on the personas as a way to kind of, put on an air that's different from reality, versus, getting into the sense of like, look, I'm going to, with my own inner maturity, tap into this right here and now in my everyday life is the spiritual connection that I want, because it's a connection to myself, and I am life. And now you're having this Neptune transit. Neptune is transiting that conversation that you've been having your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
A transit of Neptune to it is kind of the doubling up of the layer of Neptune. So it can feel like it becomes more salient, this conversation. Neptune on Saturn, 2 times Neptune on Saturn can feel like moments of like, whoa, things are getting really real. The dream is, can feel like almost like the dream is dead, reality is too real. But then on the flip side, it can be like, that's all the dream. That's all the play of Maya, is like this whole thing about reality is too real, and I have to get somewhere else. Just, like put it in the trash folder, like the whole thing, because there's this other Neptunian possibility. So again, I've been talking and we're winding down. So I want to, kind of wind down what I'm saying too, and check in with you, Dana, and see like how this is sitting with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's been a tricky one. I feel like I've wanted, knowing that I've been in particularly the Neptune square Neptune, and that always being Mercury as well. It's actually relatively recently that I even realized that Saturn was involved too. And so I think I've been kind of wondering, well, why am I not just having all these amazing dreams about like oneness, and like, why isn't it just like super awesome and dreamy? Like, but it's been tricky, but I think that now, I mean, now that I hear you say these things, I definitely see the potential for, as you said at the beginning, like kind of bringing a cohesion and a maturity to that conversation, that often troubled conversation between, Neptune and Saturn, and also the Neptune Mercury stuff with the Sun Saturn stuff, like that there's about making the, you know, just allowing those, find exploring that place where they meet, and often it is in that sadness. I think the last time I discovered when I started taking Ren's Archetypal Astrology course and started looking into this stuff, that the last time I had Saturn was conjunct my Neptune, which was a few years ago. That's when I wrote probably the saddest song I've ever written, which was just about, it was basically about if and when I can just let go and just be with this sadness, just be this pitiful being that I am, then then there will be lightness. Then the song's called like Nothing Left to Do But Fly. Like once I can just like let go of all the striving and just like sit into the unworthiness that I feel, then the only next thing that could happen is flight, basically. That, like, and for some kind of freedom, like, and I didn't even know, I didn't know anything about astrology at the time that I wrote that song. So it was discovering afterwards the kind of Neptune Saturn kind of aspect of it. But I feel now like I'm starting to, and that there's potential for the next stage in that, because it was so sad at that time. I was just overwhelmed by the sadness of that unworthy feeling. Whereas now I feel somewhat on the other end of it. Like I can temper those things when they come, when I feel that kind of what I have come to associate as being a real Saturnian kind of feeling of like, oh, I'll never like get this thing right, or like, whatever it is, that I can just bring some mindfulness to that, and a bit of the larger picture to it, and just go, okay, this is just how you feel right now, as you were just saying. And the feeling will pass, and so yeah.
I'm like in total awe and honoring of you. I mean, the fact that you went through that experience and you were describing how difficult it was and how uncomfortable it was, yet you were feeling it, which is actually what it asks from us, is to be there with our presence with that, and not escape, not escape into the dream. And that's what you did.
It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard.
And at the same time, today, when we began talking, you have, this Neptune, Saturn is a part of this combination here with Mercury, Neptune, and it's really being pulled together by the Neptune transit right now. You can see it right there. Neptune opposite Saturn, square to Neptune. Mm-hmm. Yet when you came in, the first words that you brought were totally coming from inner authority. It's totally coming in from the extent that you dialed in Saturn in your life. It was like, you know what, I'm ready to just be myself now. And I'm ready to, it was emanating off of you. That Saturn, I noticed it right away. The sense of the Saturnian maturity is there in a way that is quite profound, is uniquely your own, and is also, in a way that only a Sun Saturn and a Saturn Neptune person can express and can be. And so you went through that experience when Saturn transited your natal Neptune, and in classic Moon Pluto way too, you just felt, you felt it, that's actually what we want. We don't want to escape. We want to know everything in life is allowed. Like life is this deep, profound, broad mystery, and everything is allowed. And it's, we are not separate from life. We are here, we are life. And it's for us to be present with whatever's coming up, and that's what you did when Saturn was transiting your natal Neptune. Now you've got Neptune transiting your natal Saturn. The voice of the authority came in, and there was that, you brought that here even before the reading. So the reading is really just, it's almost like we're traveling at night, and the reading is like, have you ever been like in like a storm or something at night when the lightning flashes so bright, suddenly you're like, I can see everything around me. You know, like you're like, we get that out east here when you have these thunderheads and the lightning is so bright. Suddenly all your friends, all their faces are like really clear. It's like, whoa, we're like in daylight right now, you know? And so it's almost like a reading is like that, you know, we're traveling and it's like, you know, we're sensing our way, but then we get this flash of light and we see like, oh, this is where I'm at. Like, it's okay. You know, it's okay. This is where I'm at. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Like I am making ground. I am doing good. And so that inner authority is where you're at now. And if we look at this transit chart, we can see that you have your Uranus opposition. Your Uranus is at 23 degrees of Scorpio. Uranus
Yeah.
currently is at 14 degrees of Taurus. So within the next, I'll have to look at my ephemeris, but probably, so 20, so that Uranus would have to get up to about 18 degrees to be able to start an opposition there, which will probably happen within a year from now. And then in 2024 or 20, let me see if I got my ephemeris. In 2024, 2023, we have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Guess what? At 23 degrees of Taurus, I think 24 degrees, right opposite your natal Jupiter. So the sense that you have of moving in a direction is there. Like there is movement happening. You had that Saturn transit, your natal Neptune. You felt what you felt at that time. Now you're coming into a place of inner authority. And then, you know, Uranus is the archetype of Uranus is associated with flight. I don't know if you know that. Jupiter Uranus, that was in the chart of one of the Wright brothers.
Right.
You know, the sense of the leap. It's almost like leaping off the Jupiter Uranus. Like if you got like Jupiter Uranus transit, say you got Jupiter Uranus transit going both ways, Jupiter transiting Uranus, Uranus transiting Jupiter. It's just like, I'm just going to take a leap off this cliff and see where it goes. Whoa, I'm flying, you know? That's the Jupiter Uranus combination, and it will be a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in the sky opposite your natal Uranus. Let me just be sure when that's happening. 2024 spring, maybe a little bit in 2023. So we are going to begin winding down here because we've gone a little bit over. But I just want to check in with you, Dana, see how it's sitting with you, see how you feel.
I feel great. I feel like you've revealed some insights about my chart that and my transits that I haven't been able to glean before. So I'm just feeling really excited and
Yay!
And happy and stimulated. Yeah, for sure.
Anybody ever seen that Saturday Night Live skit with Kristen Wiig when she's the Target woman in like Wisconsin or whatever? She goes, yay! That's what. Okay, great. So Dana, thank you so much for kind of jumping into the cauldron in true Moon Pluto fashion. You were not afraid to go into the underworld with us, you know.
Oh, total pleasure.
So, I mean, that's just totally commend you and thank you. And I thank everyone for being here. I'm going to be teaching a course coming up, Archetypal Astrology, Fundamentals of Archetypal Astrology as a spiritual practice. So everybody who has registered for this, or if you're watching the recording of this, you'll have something you can click and you'll receive information. You'll receive, if you're here now with us, you'll receive the recording and also the information on my upcoming course. Somebody mentioned Ren, studying with Ren. I think Dana, you mentioned it, author of this book, my colleague, wonderful book. If you're interested in archetypal astrology, that's going to be one of the books in that fundamentals course, which I invite you all to join. It's going to be an amazing journey. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And I just want to open it up before we go to see if there's any other questions, any kind of curiosities, observations as we wind down here.
That was just really amazing. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for your insights. They were so great.
Thank you everybody for joining. We got a great crew here. So yeah, so everybody look out for that email, look out for that course, and the recording of this, and again, thank you. Big hugs to everybody. Wonderful wishes. Thank you for being here tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. Take care, everybody.
Hope to cross paths with all of you.
Mhm.